Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So, did you know that history is both an art and a science? This is the critical question that we are going to be answering even as we endeavor through this journey. So, let me take us through our lesson one as far as this course is concerned. So, we will get to know the definition of history after knowing exactly the question that we will be answering for these endeavors. Remember, we are looking at the development of historical thought since 1900. So as a historian, we as historians, we need to think critically and see how we will be arguing out our points as we go through this unit together. What is history? History refers to the study of man's past activities. It also means inquiries or investigations. History also refers to man's past experience. I think this one is self-explanatory, and we need not to build more on that. So history also refers to the study of significant aspects of the past. Remember, you need to be very categorical and include the word significant. We don't just study everything in history, we only tend to rely on the significant ones. Then history also refers to people's world views about human life from the beginning, present, and future. Very, very important. So we want to look at we want to focus on our main issue as far as this course is concerned, how other scholars have also defined history. And that takes us to the definition of history according to E.H. Carr. So in his argument, I'll just be taking us through this very fast. You will also have to go through your notes and get to know exactly what we're talking about. So in his argument on what history is, Carr sets out the following premise. History is a continual dialogue between the past and present. So according to Carr, it's all about you having that dialogue that is not ending. It's a continual dialogue between the present and the past. That's why we say that in history, we focus on the past, we relate it with the present, then we use the same to predict the future. So it's a continual dialogue. It's something that is not ending any time soon. Then again, it's an interaction between the historian and his facts. That one is also very, very important. I don't want to build more on that because it's self-explanatory. Establishing the criteria for selecting historical fact, Carr argues that fact itself is insufficient and must be correctly and truthfully interpreted. So this is where we come across the whole aspect of interpreting our facts. It's not just a matter of throwing them there. So up to here, at least you're seeing some developments as far as the definition of history is concerned. It's all about us correctly and truthfully interpreting the facts that we are talking about. So to arrive at a correct interpretation and factual account of history, a historian must continually question why and whether, as history is essence, is change. Remember, history is all about change over time. So whichever area you decide to focus on, is there any essence of change and continuity? If there is no aspect of change and continuity, then that's no longer history. That one is being reminded to us by our forefathers, the likes of E.H. Carr. There must be some aspect of change and continuity as far as history is concerned. Then each era or century has its own interpretation of what history is. Remember, historians in the 19th century, historians in the 16th century during the era of the likes of Herodotus, the likes of Homer, the likes of Thucydides, the likes of Plutarch, Livy, name them. They had their own ways of interpreting facts. We come to the 21st century where we meet the likes of Alan Ogod, professor. We meet the likes of the late Professor Diele Afikpo, the likes of Kenneth Dike, Nigeria. They also have their own ways of interpreting these facts. So each and every era is very unique as far as the interpretation of history is concerned. And that is exactly what Carr also reminds us over here, that each era or century has its own interpretation of what history is. Very, very critical, and we need to be mindful of that. So Carr also reveals that as a social being, the historian is naturally and inclined to be selective of the facts he or she chooses. Yeah, that also brings some aspect of, remember history is so vast and we cannot study it in its totality. So whichever place you choose to focus on, there must be that objectivity. You must study it objectively to make it very, very ideal, to make history have a meaning. You choose an area, then you need to study that area very, very objectively in order to make it make sense. That is what we call objective history. That is what we call a truthful history. We have urban history, we have agricultural history, we have environmental history, we have biographical history, we have gender history. So whichever area you choose to focus on, you need to study it, you need to be very, very critical, you need to be very, very objective. Carr likens history to an enormous jigsaw puzzle with many missing parts. For instance, the crossing of the Rubicon River by Julius Caesar. So according to Carr, history has some gaps, just like the jigsaw, that needs to be filled. Take, for instance, the crossing of the Rubicon River by Julius Caesar in the 49 BC. You ask yourself, why Julius Caesar? Why is it that historians are just trying to focus on Julius Caesar, not remembering that there were some other soldiers that Julius Caesar was leading? We understand that Julius Caesar was warned several times not to cross the Rubicon River, but again, he went ahead to do so. But how come we are not focusing on the soldiers whom he led? Why is it that you are not focusing on the people who are also living in that era and also witnessed the whole aspect of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon River? So why are we only focusing on Julius Caesar and not other generals? Those are the missing parts that we as historians need to fill. And those are the things that E.H. Carr is talking about, that history is like an enormous jigsaw puzzles with many missing parts. So those are the parts that we as historians, those are the parts that you as a historian needs to fill. Correct and truthful interpretation of historical facts is equally important, stresses Carr. Carr again reminds us that we need to correctly and truthfully interpret these facts. That is when history will make a meaning. Facts are like fish swimming about in a vast and sometimes inaccessible ocean. What the historian catches will depend largely on what part of the ocean he's fishing and what fish he intends to catch. That's what I was saying initially, that history is so vast. So the area that you want to focus on, it's up to you. The kind of truth that you want to bring on board from that area, it's up to you. You want to study agricultural history, the facts that you want to establish from that area, it's up to you. History is so vast, so it's upon you, it's incumbent upon you to know the area that you want to focus on. But at the end of the day, you need to come up with an objective history. That is what Carr is reminding us of. So historian must necessarily cultivate an objective approach to history. That's Carr. This duty of historian to respect facts cannot be overshadowed by the obligation to see what the facts are, to see that the facts are accurate. So remember, it's still talking about the truth, the facts. You need to be very objective in your approach. Otherwise, you come up with a subjective history, then that will no longer be a history that you'd like your audience to focus on. So you need to be very, very objective in your history. So history is meaningless in a static world, affirms Carr. History is in essence change, reveals Carr. So in a static world, in a place where there is no change, the history becomes very, very meaningless, because Carr reminds us that for you to have a good history, then it must show that aspect of change. Very, very important. Remember, history is all about change and continuity. So our main focus as far as this unit or this course is concerned is about the nature of historical thinking. So we say that central to the nature of historical thinking, we ask the question, what is historical thinking? Is it different from other forms of thinking? So this can only be answered by comparing historical inquiry with other forms of inquiry, such as scientific inquiry. It's only scientific inquiry that we can use to answer those two critical questions. So one of the crucial issues have been the scientificity of history. The question whether it is a science or not has preoccupied the analytical history since the 18th century to the development of two main schools of thought. So those two key questions, remember we are talking about the scientificity of history. Is history a science? Is history an art, or is it both? Those arguments have split scholars into two schools of thought, which we are going to focus on as we endeavor through this course. So number one school is the idealist philosophers, who believe that history is a science, but only to some extent. In other words, they believe that history is both a science and an art. We also have another school of thought known as positivist philosophers. They believe that there is no fundamental difference between history and exact sciences. There is no fundamental difference between history and exact sciences. So for now, we will just have to focus on those two and get to understand those arguments. Remember, we have idealist philosophers and positivist philosophers. So as we go on with this unit, we will get to know more as far as their arguments are concerned. So for now, we shall stop there as you try to internalize everything as we wait for our next class. Thank you very much. Thank you very kindly, and may you have a restful day ahead of you.